Now we're going to get down to the nitty-gritty of what Indians are all about.
I still say we Indian people are believers in the truth. This is the way of life that was given to your people. You're born an Indian, you're going to die an Indian. Indianness is a good life. You're facing an Indian this afternoon.
Good Saturday afternoon out there, everyone. Welcome to your number one source for Native American television news, Muskogee Vision. I am Jason Salzman, and I am your host. We are here in the Muskogee Media Studios and are ready for this week's episode. We got a lot of great things to get to, a lot of information to get you. We're going to bring you another table this week because we are talking about the Royal versus Murphy case, which has now been picked up by the Supreme Court. I know a lot of people out there don't know much about this case, but it basically will decide whether the 1866 reservation boundaries of the Muskogee Creek Nation have ever been disestablished or not, which means a lot of changes if it is, in fact, still in place. So we'll talk a little bit about that in the table, bringing you up to speed on all the things that are going on there. Plus, we'll visit with a Muskogee artist, Mr. Bill McCulley, and we'll talk with him about a life-saving transplant that he had. All of that coming up this week. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Make a memory by coming back home. Make a memory by immersing yourself in Muskogee culture. Make a memory that will last a lifetime. Make a memory at this year's 44th Annual Muskogee Creek Nation Festival in Okmulgee.
Make your memories with 4 days of free family fun at the Muskogee Creek Nation's annual festival, June 21st through the 24th in Okmulgee. For more festival information, visit creekfestival.com. And thanks for coming back with us here on the program as we get started this week. You know, one of my, a lot of people I meet here at this job, working, talking to people, covering them over the years. One of the guys that I've always known, good friends with, Mr. Bill McCulley. He's an artist, a local Muskogee Creek artist, but he's also a recipient of a transplant. And he talked with us recently, visited about his story, about his art, how this has changed his life. And we wanted to share that with you here today.
I actually have end-stage liver disease, but I had also had a deal of what they call NASH, which is non-alcoholic steatosis hepatitis. And what that does, when you get too much protein, it goes to your blood, and that blood will go up to your brain. And I'm out of, I'd actually lose my memory and I wouldn't even know what I was doing. And my wife, Roberta, she actually took care of me all that time. And I was in the hospital like 3 times in Norman. But we decided when we moved back, we moved over to Locust Grove. And after that, I think that was around last August, I was in the hospital like, I guess like twice every month, like at weeks at a time. And I got to see a gastroenterologist. And anyways, the first time I seen him, he actually referred me up to the transplant center in Oklahoma City. But after I went there and did all my workups and blood workups and stuff, well, they ended up shutting their liver program down a month after we got. But they sent all my paperwork over to the Baptist Medical Center, where they have what they call Nazi Zudi, transplant center. And after I got in there, well, everything went great. I mean, because the doctors, they were all, I mean, if I had to go to the hospital or something, I had like 5 doctors come in checking on me all the time, and it's just something that it's really hard to explain because half the stuff I couldn't remember, and part of it I did, you know, and there's a lot of people out there that I know that have liver problems, and they think it's kind of helpless or hopeless to, but all we did was just try, and it worked out great, and they put me on the list in March of this year, and I think it was after they put me on the list, well, actually I was in the hospital down here in Claremore and Tulsa, what do you call it, St. Francis, and up there I spent the majority of my time in the hospitals. And I was in the hospital in Baptist Medical Center, and my ammonia levels went down. So they were talking about letting me out, and we were getting ready to come home. And so that Monday, they said, we're going to check your blood and stuff, and we'll know tomorrow. And anyways, I got out, well, that day, what do you call it, the physical therapy, the people came by, and they asked me if I wanted to go walking. I said, great, yeah, great. So I went walking around with my walker and everything, but as I was leaving, they had the transplant team outside my door, and I didn't know what they were doing, but they were going from room to room and talking about each patient. And my wife, she was inside there, and she heard them talking about me as I was left. And the doctor, the main doctor, the surgeon, his name was Dr. Cawley, and he actually seen me out there, and he talked to me, and he found out I was Native American, and he really talked and that day. And the next morning, I thought I was going to be getting out, and I woke up about 5, went to the restroom, and I was washing my hands at the sink. And that's when I think 2 of the nurses came in early in that morning, at about 5. And they told me, they said, has anybody contacted you yet? And I said, no. I said, for what? And she said, well, they're going to offer you a liver. They said they've got a liver for you. And they said the doctor will be by later to talk to you about it. And I said, great. I was happy. And Roberta, my wife, she was actually in the room with me. She stayed in there with me. And it just worked out. I mean, it's great. I mean, I told her, I said, call everybody. And well, I started as an artist. I started when I was a kid. I started drawing and painting back then when I was just a kid. And I never did it as an adult until later on. And I told my wife, I said, I'm gonna start trying to paint. I mean, I already knew I could paint and everything. I just never did do it. And I've just been blessed with, you know, but actually anything I ever did I always did at a higher level than most people. And it's just something that I love math in school, and most people don't like it. And I started, I think it was 89, I think I put a couple of things in the Five Tribes Museum for the show. What are my inspirations?
Yeah.
You know, I've never been able to figure that out. It's just something that's there in my head that I always, here's what I do is I look at it at a logical state. What I look at it is you got millions of thoughts going through your head. Okay, just stop and take 10 of them. And just concentrate on that and go from there. And that's all I do. And that's actually, I'm anything I look at or see, you know, it's just something there I've always, you know, people want me to write artist statements out and stuff like that, but some of the things they have meaning, all of them do, but I do so many that I get tired of writing. To me, it all comes from the same place, and that's, you know, and that's not even from me. It's mostly from upstairs. You know, because like I said, you know, there's a lot of things I can't, I don't understand either because, you know, but all I know is I like to have a paintbrush in my hand, colors and whatever, and just try to make of what I want to see, and that's it.
And I want to thank Bill for being on the show with us. A lot of people enjoy his art, and he enjoys doing it. So wish him great health moving forward. As I said in the opener, big case picked up by the Supreme Court, Royal versus Murphy, which will decide whether the 1866 boundaries of the Creek Nation Reservation were ever disestablished or not. That's coming up. We had a table discussion about this very complex case and issue.
So on May 21st, the Supreme Court decided that they were going to hear the Royal v. Murphy case. That's the case that we've all been covering lately. What they're going to decide is whether or not the Creek Nation under the 1866 territorial boundaries constitutes a reservation under U.S. Code. Sterling's got some more information on what we can expect timeline-wise.
Yeah, so right now the two parties in the case are going to be filing their merit briefs, essentially explaining their stance on the issue. Looks like they're due in early July as of now. However, the Royal Party has filed a request for extension based on religious reasons, so it could be moved to later in July, which pushes the rest of the process back, essentially. Depending on if this is granted, response from the Murphy Party will be due in either August or September. The response, again, back to that, they get one more time, by Royal will be in late September or early October. So essentially that takes us pretty close to when the Supreme Court usually hears oral arguments, which is October, and going on into the next July. The Solicitor General who represents the U.S. And their interests will file a brief also supporting the side that they take, which has been Royal so far in the cert petition and in the 10th Circuit. Also, the process will be open to amicus briefs, friends of the court, so you can expect the Muskogee Creek Nation, Murphy side, Royal, Oklahoma on the Royal side, along with Big Business probably and some other parties of interest. After that, oral arguments are going to start. Those are going to be open to the public. Like I said, begins in early October through July of next year. And oftentimes, you can expect a ruling in July is when most of them come out. However, none of that stuff is set in stone. In fact, most of the schedule could change, essentially. Also, during oral arguments, other parties in the case can get time to argue, but often they don't. The only one that really does, almost guaranteed, is the Solicitor General.
So, like, it would be fair to maybe assume that if somebody were a Creek citizen were to just ask us on the street, you know, when do you think this will be resolved? When do you think there'll be an actual final decision? And it could be maybe like fall 2019, right?
Well, it could be about a year and a month from now.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah.
As soon as that,
Yeah.
but it could be longer.
I mean, it
who
depends on the
knows?
schedule. It
That's pretty quick
depends.
for a
Right.
Supreme
That's what I was
Court.
going to say.
Yeah,
But
it's such a complex
It depends
case.
on like how many more delays they have. You know, if they delay anything else, you know, within the case, any of the other filings. So I mean, I'd say a year and a half.
And I think, you know, and I think too, you talk about the timeliness because it would be nice if this was the only iron that the Muskogee Creek Nation had in the fire right now, but it is definitely not the case.
Yeah.
A lot of other things going on.
Right.
Fountainhead property just put into trust. The entirety of the Fountainhead property just put into trust. Big plans there, of course.
Talk
IHS
about
lawsuit.
the litigation
you know.
schedule alone, right?
Yeah, right, absolutely.
Well,
just the lawsuits, yeah.
One of the cases, I mean, the Bruner case that's going through trial
Right,
court
that
right
too.
now was delayed because of
Because
this
of
case. They were
Murphy,
trying
yes.
to see.
And the porch ban thing's been in the background for years now,
Absolutely.
essentially.
The thing that when I think about this case, I think about really it revolves around ramifications. What does it mean for the future, and what do we look like going forward? Can we handle it? Is it even something that's within our scope of ability to handle? I mean, you know, like I said, in previous coverage, I've talked with Light Horse Police Chief Robert Hawkins, and he mentioned there would be a need for upwards of 300 more officers, lots more money, lots more manpower, of course, lots more equipment, everything like that. And he, you know, wasn't sure how we get to that point, even the ability to get to that point. But then you have other things where people are really happy about it and going, oh, it's a win for sovereignty, and yay, we got a reservation.
Well, I'd like to ask a question about that because I mean, as soon as I heard about this, you spoke on like the forum, the open forum that they had, the lady
Yeah.
coming forward saying, oh, you know,
Congratulations. Yeah.
The moment I heard about this, I mean, the first thing that flashed in my mind were the cons.
Yeah.
Like, oh, what does this mean? What is this going to do? I mean, what are the pros?
Methinks you are a reporter myself.
Well, I think the cardinal rule is anytime you get a chance to recapture sovereignty, you take it.
That's right. Well,
You
yeah.
figure out the rest later seems to be the attitude.
Sure.
Yeah.
And,
Well,
and
and
with a lot of big cases, you have a PR component, and you need to talk up your side.
That's the perspective that we've really seen from the Creek Nation officials is
Right.
that this is not only a win for sovereignty, but this was how it was supposed to be handled. That Oklahoma wrongfully took over jurisdiction that was never theirs,
Sure.
and it's just now being challenged.
Yeah.
So if that's how it was originally intended, then you know that I think you'll see the Supreme Court, you know, look that way. But one of the things the state of Oklahoma brings up is they could lose half the state, and the civil implications. They're saying, you know, that this could open a can of worms civilly, because who has the right to tax? Does that mean that we pay property taxes to the nation? Now that would in turn fund things like the police force,
Right.
like we see, you know, on the county and city level now, in funding schools and the police force. But
Oklahoma still asks the police, non-natives,
Right.
because the Supreme Court precedent right now is still natives don't have jurisdiction over non-natives, and I don't see any component of this case that's going to change that. The other thing I failed to point out is with the briefs, essentially, and with the oral arguments, it's not like they're going to go in and rehash their briefs each side of the case. Actually, it's going to be largely focused on the questions the justices had after reading their briefs to fill out any details that they need clarification on with the parties in their briefs.
Yeah, and there's a lot to it. I mean, like you said, the vast majority of the issues surrounding this case and the outcome of this case are we don't knows. You know,
Yeah.
they're unanswered questions. And our entire job, everybody at this table, our job in life is to ask questions. So this is like a godsend for us as a subject because
Well, it's also a pain too because you
It is
want
a
to
pain.
try and
You want
answer
the
some
answers.
questions
Yeah.
for people, and
I
it's
shouldn't
like
say
no one
getting
will
answers to
speculate.
No, well, what's
That's-
funny is I've noticed as we've gone about this is essentially like when we ask the questions, we get questions back like rhetorical questions from our sources. In fact, we watched a roundtable of lawyers at OU that did a panel on this early on, and essentially they're like, we think it could impact this, and this, but we don't know how. And that's
Yeah.
been really the story of this entire thing. That's how Jessica framed her big
Yeah.
piece. It's the
We
big
don't
case is
know.
a question.
everything we got too.
As she said, that's what they're asking the two parties.
Yeah.
Is it a reservation? And then after that,
Yeah.
well, if it is, how's it going to impact everything?
Yeah.
So let's say that it is a reservation. They find that it is a reservation. Like, what's the next step? Like, what do they disestablish it? I mean, would
Well,
that
I
be?
mean, we don't know.
Yeah.
Again,
Yeah.
we don't know. I think one of the things that popped up in my mind, recently, Jason can tell you with the Medicaid issue, that the executive branch, the U.S. executive branch, does not necessarily recognize tribal sovereignty. They don't necessarily recognize tribal governments. They see Native Americans as a race, as opposed to, a sovereign nation. And so I don't know if you see the Supreme Court uphold the 10th Circuit ruling. There is talk that maybe Congress would come in and disestablish the reservation. I don't know. I mean, and that's what we're getting. We don't know what would happen, and we don't know what the next steps would be. As
Yeah.
far as if it is granted, we do know law enforcement, like Chief Hawkins has already said, we're going to have to hire more guys. So I think that's one of the first steps that you'll see in trying to maintain the criminal jurisdiction at least. Everything else is probably way far down the road.
Yeah, and I talked Wednesday. I talked with the executive director of NCAI, Jacqueline Pata, and she was discussing how, instances like this, and Sterling said, whenever you get a chance to affirm or strengthen tribal sovereignty at any juncture, don't think about the end game. Just get the tribal sovereignty strengthened and structured and advanced a little more. And to her end, what she was speaking to was the fact that the things like the Medicaid issue that have come up sort of send out this call that from the top down, we're once again seeing a misunderstanding of tribal sovereignty. The famous Mark Treyant question and George Bush answer. We're seeing a misunderstanding of tribal sovereignty, what it means, and how you work with in a government-to-government relationship from the U.S. government. And that's not a good sign because this whole case or this whole issue would seem to predicate itself on a need for the people looking at it and in control of things to know what tribal sovereignty is. And that we're dealing with individual tribes that are their own governments that are to be dealt with like separate nations, basically.
One of the other things, though, on the flip side, I think it was the Tulsa County Assistant District Attorney. One of the things he mentioned on criminal jurisdiction is he didn't know how it would work, and that would have to become a conversation because you didn't want weapons drawn and someone shouting, "Are you Native American? What tribe are you enrolled
Not
with?"
everybody's just obviously
so-
native is essentially what Jessica's saying.
Right, and
so
so
you've got
there's-
real hodgepodge
Yeah, there's
citizenship.
some issues on both sides, that I think will have to be addressed, before this thing, is fully established. And I mean, they've got a little bit of time with the Supreme Court, a
Right.
year and a half to try and figure some of these things out.
Well, Sauls, you talked to Attorney General Kevin Dillinger, our Attorney General. Essentially,
Yeah.
he said maybe these things could be ironed out with cross-jurisdictional agreements.
Yeah.
But as we've seen, even with, I'd say, a more basic setup, that those have taken some maintenance over time and obviously compacting on the civil end. But that's seems to be born out of ongoing negotiations. They have regularly scheduled things where they have to come back to the table and work on them, and we've seen the cross-jurisdictional agreements suspended before too.
Yeah.
So when you get in a more complex arrangement, well, how's that going to go? It seems like it's going to be an ongoing thing if that's going to be the case.
There's nothing that says that they have to, sign those agreements. Like, there's nothing that says that the city of Okmulgee would have to sign over that agreement with the tribe.
Yep.
And so we don't know what that means for those entities as well as for if the reservation is intact.
Great.
Now, kind of drawing it back to the original person and some of the implications that kind of bears with it is, what does that mean for all those Native people that were convicted, like that have been convicted? If this is upheld and Murphy gets off.
One of the things the same Tulsa County Assistant District Attorney told us, excuse me, that they were looking at that, and they were looking at paperwork and trying to get everything in order so that if this case is upheld, then they can go in and file all the paperwork and have a smooth transition over to the federal court system or tribal court system, whichever court that it needs to go into. But that's another thing that'll have to be addressed too. We're estimating probably about 300 individuals that would have had their cases tried in a state court that if this is upheld, it would be overturned and they would need to go to a tribal court or federal court.
And when I talked to Attorney General Dellinger, he said as well, like he didn't feel, and again, it's his opinion, it's not stated fact, and he knows, but he wanted to assuage the fears of like mass chaos and like opening the cell doors and just letting everybody in prison out. I mean, and that's the way some people have thought of it, you know, and had a picture in their mind of. So, you know, that's out there too. And he just, you know, he talked to that.
I think that just raises more questions. I mean, is
Right.
the tribe going to have to open
Yeah.
up its own correctional
Sure.
facilities?
And I asked him about that, and he said that may be something we have to look at. And I thought, when he said that, I was like, oh, man, that's a big piece of this story. The fact that the tribe would even consider building, you know, a correctional facility, which that's a big undertaking.
Well,
So-
I mean, it's even more money.
yeah,
So
exactly.
I mean, the basis of this is a huge case, and it could affect, you know, how life as we know it in Oklahoma.
Yeah.
And, you know, there's a lot of unknowns, and we'll try and get the answers as we're coming through.
Yeah, it seems like, okay, so you have two opposing sides here, but at the end of the day, you'd like to think that all of them have a very specific interest to see that this goes smoothly, despite disagreements.
Right. And that looks like that's probably a good place to end our discussion today. We'll go ahead and table this. All right, that's going to wrap us up for another episode of Muskogee Vision. Folks, I want to remind you that we are getting closer and closer to the 44th annual Muskogee Creek Nation Festival. It's coming up June 21st through the 24th here in Okmulgee. Definitely want to remind you all to come visit with us out at the Claude Cox Omniplex here. Go to the rodeo, go to the softball tournaments, see all the parade, the fanfare, all the culture going on, the stomp dance. We will be there too, Muskogee Media booth. Come up and see us, tell us you watch us or listen to us or read the newspaper, anything, and we'll get you signed up for the newspaper right there, all kinds of goodies. We'll have shirts, all kinds of stuff out there. So come see us. Keep visiting us on MuskogeeMedia.com and go to YouTube to our online channel and subscribe. For Jared Moore, I'm Jason Salzman. This is Muskogee Vision. We'll see you next time.